The great hall was lit by 1,000 candles in crystal chandeliers, their light pooling on marble floors and gilded walls. Masked figures moved through the space like beautiful equations, each one precisely placed. Vivian Alcott stood near the entrance in a green silk gown that was not hers, and a half-mask of black velvet, and she had 40 minutes before midnight to make herself invisible to the most powerful man in the county. The protocol had been explained at the door. Lord Blackthorne would greet his guests at midnight. Before that, any unattached woman of standing was considered available for the Lord's attention. After midnight, the Lord would make his selections, not for anything unsavory, the steward assured, but for his household. A personal herbalist, a librarian, a scholar. Positions of great honor. Positions, Vivian understood, from which one did not easily resign. She needed to be visibly unavailable when the Lord arrived. She needed, specifically, to appear as though she had already formed an attachment. A conversation, a connection, the suggestion of a bond that would make the Lord's steward pass over her name. She needed to kiss someone. She scanned the ballroom. The men were uniformly impressive, broad-shouldered, well-dressed, masked in silver and gold and bone-white porcelain. They moved with the confidence of people who belonged here. All except one. He stood near the far wall, half hidden by a column, wearing a mask of plain dark cloth and a coat that was well cut but unremarkable. No crest, no signet ring, no circle of admirers. He held a glass of wine he had not tasted. She could see the level had not changed in the 10 minutes she had been watching. He looked, she thought, like someone who had come to a party and forgotten why. He looked safe. He looked forgettable. He looked like exactly the kind of man no one would question if she walked up and kissed him. She walked toward him. Her pulse was a metronome in her throat. The silk of her gown whispered against the marble floor. She stopped in front of him, and he looked down at her with dark eyes behind the plain mask. And she said, "Forgive me. This will be brief." She kissed him. His lips were cool, not cold. Cool the way stone is cool in summer. The shock of recognition hit her like a scent from another room. She knew this temperature. She knew this stillness. Beneath the taste of wine he had not drunk was something older, something mineral and deep like water drawn from a well that had no bottom. His hand came up, not grabbing, not pulling, and rested against her arm, and the touch was so careful, it made her chest ache. She pulled back. His eyes behind the mask were dark and steady and far too aware. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was almost level. "That should be sufficient." She turned and walked away. She did not look back. Her lips tingled with cold. And somewhere under her ribs, something she could not name was unfolding like a letter she had never finished reading. She found the terrace, breathed the frozen air, and told herself it had worked. It had not worked. But that is getting ahead of what came before. To understand why Vivian Alcott kissed a stranger at a masked ball to avoid the attention of a man she had never met, you must go back 3 months to a borrowed table in a chemist's shop and the sister who held the keys to everything. Vivian measured foxglove tincture into a brown glass bottle, tilting the dropper until the liquid caught the light at the angle that meant 16 drops exactly. She could measure by weight alone, by color, by the faint bitterness that rose from the glass. But the ritual of precision kept her hands steady when the rest of her was not. She worked from a rented table in the back of Mr. Hadley's chemist shop on Brine Lane, 3 streets and an entire world away from the apothecary that had been hers. Mr. Hadley let her compound prescriptions for 1/3 of the fee. It was not generosity. It was commerce. Her formulations were better than his, and they both knew it. 14 drops, she said aloud to no one. 15, 16. The bottle filled. She sealed it with wax, pressing her thumb into the warm surface until the shop's borrowed stamp held firm. The bell above the door rang. Marguerite entered the way Marguerite always entered, as though the room had been waiting for her. "You look thin," Marguerite said, setting her gloves on the counter beside a row of camphor jars. She did not remove her coat. "You look like you want something," Vivian said. She did not look up from the foxglove. Marguerite's smile was the practiced kind, the kind that implied warmth while delivering none. She was older by 4 years, handsomer by most accounts, had inherited their mother's talent for making other people feel as though they were failing an examination they had not agreed to sit. "There is a ball," Marguerite said, "at Blackthorn House, 3 months from now, on the solstice. Lord Blackthorn hosts it annually for the county's prominent families. We have been invited." "You have been invited," Vivian corrected. "I compound medicines from a borrowed table. You were invited specifically." Marguerite pulled a card from her reticule and set it beside the camphor. Cream paper, heavy stock, embossed with a crest. Vivian did not recognize. A serpent wound around a leafless tree. "The invitation names you, Vivian Alcott, herbalist and apothecary." The room smelled of camphor and something under it, something metallic and old, rising from the card itself. Vivian did not touch it. "Why would Lord Blackthorn know my name?" "Because I told his steward about your skills. Lord Blackthorn is a collector of rare talent, they say. Herbalists, physicians, scholars of unusual knowledge." Marguerite's voice carried the bright efficiency of someone who had already decided the outcome. "Your attendance is required." "Required by whom?" "By me." "By the terms of our arrangement." Marguerite straightened a jar she had not disturbed. "The shop license renews in April. I hold it. You work under it. If you wish to continue working, continue mixing your little bottles and feeling useful, you will attend Lord Blackthorn's ball and you will present yourself as a woman of standing." "I am a woman of standing. I stand here all day." Marguerite did not smile. 3 months. A gown will be provided, a mask, as the tradition requires. You will go, you will be gracious, and you will not embarrass the family name that I have spent 3 years repairing, after you nearly destroyed it. This was the lie Marguerite had constructed and maintained like a hothouse orchid, that Vivian had been the reckless one, the one who had nearly lost the family business, and that Marguerite's intervention, seizing the deed, the license, the keys, had been rescue rather than theft. The truth was quieter and uglier. Their mother's debts had been Marguerite's debts, contracted under their mother's name but spent on Marguerite's ambitions. Vivian had signed the shop over to protect the license itself, to keep the Alcott name on the door. She had sacrificed ownership to save the work, and Marguerite had rewritten the story until even their acquaintances believed it. "What does Lord Blackthorn actually want?" Vivian asked. "Your attendance, your expertise if he asks for it, and your silence about anything you find unusual in his household." Marguerite pulled on her gloves. "I have secured this invitation at considerable personal expense. It represents an opportunity for both of us. You will not waste it." She left. The bell rang. The camphor smell receded, and the metallic scent from the card lingered like a headache. Mr. Hadley appeared from the stockroom, carrying a crate of dried lavender. He was a thin man with spectacles that sat slightly crooked, and he had the particular gift of overhearing everything while appearing to hear nothing. "Blackthorn House," he said, setting the crate down. "Interesting. You know it?" "I supply it. Monthly order. Lamp oil, camphor blocks, and 3 dozen bottles of my worst wine." Been supplying it for 11 years. Never met the Lord himself. The steward handles everything. Pays in advance. Never haggles. He adjusted his spectacles. A man who pays in advance for terrible wine is either very rich or very strange. Lord Blackthorne, they say, is both. Have you seen him? Once. From a distance. Tall. Dark. Moved like someone who had forgotten he was supposed to look like he was in a hurry. He paused. Your sister's got plans for you, Miss Alcott. Plans have a way of costing the person who didn't make them. Vivian sealed the next bottle and pressed her thumb into the wax. The heat bit, then faded. I know, she said. The 3 months passed the way months pass for people who work. Quickly. Marked by the rhythm of orders filled and remedies measured. Vivian prepared tinctures, salves, and compounds. She treated a baker's persistent cough with elecampane syrup. She mixed a sleep draught for an elderly woman whose joints ached worse at night. She earned enough to eat, to keep her rented room above a milliner's shop, and to purchase ingredients that Marguerite's ledger did not cover. And she thought, more than she should have, about a night 7 years ago. She had been 25, still running the shop under her own name, still believing the world rewarded competence. A man had come in near closing, tall, dark-haired, with a stillness about him that she had noticed the way you notice a draft, not by seeing it, but by feeling the temperature change. He had asked for a remedy for sleeplessness. She had asked how long it had persisted. He had said, very quietly, longer than you would believe. His hands, when she gave him the bottle, had been cool, not cold. Cool the way stone is cool in summer, absorbing warmth from the air without returning it. She had noticed his chest did not rise. She had said nothing about it. He had come back 3 times that week. Each time he asked for something different. A preparation for headache, a tonic for fatigue, a salve for old scars. Each time she suspected he did not need any of it. Each time she mixed the remedy with the same care she gave every patient. Because the act of being asked, of being trusted with someone's discomfort, even invented discomfort, was the closest thing to intimacy her days contained. On the 4th visit, he had said, "You are very good at this." And she had said, "I know. That is why I do it." He had smiled. It was a strange smile. Not practiced, not social. It was the smile of someone remembering how smiling worked. Then he had left, and he had not come back. 7 years. She still remembered the temperature of his hands. That had been 3 months ago. Now the ball was over. The kiss was done. And in the morning, everything changed. The next morning, Vivian arrived at Mr. Hadley's shop to find a man sitting in the chair beside her work table. He wore no mask. He was tall, dark-haired, and he moved with the particular stillness of someone who had forgotten he was supposed to look like he was in a hurry. "Good morning," he said. "Mr. Hadley tells me you are the finest herbalist in the county." She set down her bag. The scent of dried rosemary rose from it, mixing with the camphor and lavender of the shop. "Mr. Hadley is generous. Who are you?" "My name is Edmund Vane. I am looking for someone to consult on a private matter, a collection of botanical preparations that require expert assessment." He extended his hand. She did not take it. She was staring at his jaw, the line of his mouth, the precise way he held himself. Something nagged at the edge of her recognition, a shape almost remembered. But the ball had been masked, and the lighting had been candlelight, and she had spent exactly 4 seconds kissing a stranger. The connection hovered just outside her grasp, and then dissolved. "What sort of preparations?" she asked. "Old ones, some centuries old. preserved in ways I do not understand. I was told you have a talent for identifying compounds by scent and texture alone. Who told you that? Your reputation precedes you. He said it without flattery, the way one might report the weather. Mr. Hadley appeared from behind a shelf of mercury thermometers, polishing his spectacles. I may have mentioned your work to Mr. Vane when he came in this morning. He pays in advance, Miss Alcott. I find that quality very persuasive. Vivian looked at Hadley, who returned her gaze with the bland innocence of a man who had just solved an equation and was waiting for her to catch up. She looked back at Edmund Vane. His hands, resting on his knees, were cool-looking even across the distance. I charge by the hour, she said, and I will need access to the full collection before I commit. Of course, he said. He stood. The air around him did not warm. Shall we begin tomorrow? Over the next 2 weeks, Vivian visited Edmund Vane's rented house on Crescent Lane 3 times. Each time he showed her a different shelf of his collection. Bottles and jars and sealed vessels containing preparations she had never encountered. Dried flowers that should have crumbled decades ago, still holding their color. Tinctures in crystal vials that smelled of minerals she had no language for. A salve, sealed with wax, stamped by a crest she almost recognized, that tingled against her skin when she tested it. Each visit she noticed something new about him. He never ate in her presence. He drew the curtains before she arrived and did not open them. The house was always cool, always quiet, and smelled faintly of old stone and something metallic. On the second visit, she said, "This tincture was mixed with distilled water from a limestone source. The calcium content is unmistakable." He leaned forward. "You can tell that by smell, by taste." She touched her finger to the rim of the bottle and brought it to her lips. Limestone water, foxglove, and something I cannot identify. Something bitter. Very old. He watched her the way people watch rain, not with purpose, but with the attention of someone who has nowhere else to be. She had the uncomfortable sensation of being studied by someone who had all the time in the world. On the third visit, she asked, "Where did you acquire these?" "Over time," he said. "These preparations span centuries. This salve alone. The wax seal uses a technique abandoned before the Georgian era. Either you are a remarkably well-connected collector, or you are remarkably old." A silence opened between them. He held it. She let it hold. "I prefer well-preserved," he said, and something in his voice shifted. Not warmth exactly, but the memory of warmth. Like a hearth that had been cold so long, you could only tell it was a hearth by the scorch marks. She did not press. She measured the next tincture and recorded her notes in the careful shorthand she had developed over years of working alone. A system no one else could read, which was both its purpose and its loneliness. Marguerite arrived at the shop on a Tuesday without warning, as was her custom. "You left the ball early," Marguerite said. It was not a question. "I stayed until 11:30. That is not early." "Lord Blackthorn's selections were announced at midnight. You were not present." I was humiliated. Marguerite's voice carried the precise, controlled quality of someone who had rehearsed her indignation. "Do you understand what I sacrificed to get you invited? You sacrificed my name and my expertise to gain access to a household that collects people the way others collect snuff boxes. Forgive me for not volunteering to be catalogued. The license renewal is in 8 weeks, Vivian. 8 weeks. If I choose not to renew it, if I decide that the Alcott name no longer benefits from your association, you will not compound medicines anywhere in this county." Vivian set down her mortar. The pestle rolled slightly, grinding against granite. "You would destroy both our incomes to punish me for leaving a party early. I would remind you," Marguerite said, "that everything you have This table, this work, this illusion of independence exists because I allow it. She left. The bell rang. Vivian picked up the pestle and ground dried valerian root until her wrist ached, and the powder was fine as dust. Mr. Hadley emerged after a suitable interval. "Your sister," he said, "keeps a very precise ledger of everything she believes she owns, including you." He set a receipt on her table. "Mr. Vane paid for the next 6 consultations in advance, in your name, not hers. I have the paperwork if you need it." "Why would I need it?" "Because paper has a way of mattering when people start making threats." He adjusted his spectacles. "I have been in commerce for 30 years, Miss Alcott. The people who threaten to take everything are usually the ones who already know they are losing something." On the 4th visit to Edmund Vane's house, Vivian brought a preparation of her own, a sleep draught mixed with lavender and passion flower, and a compound she had developed herself, designed to ease restlessness without dulling the senses. She set it on his table without explanation. He picked it up. He turned it in the light. "Why?" he asked. "Because 7 years ago, a man came into my shop and asked for a remedy for sleeplessness. He said it had persisted longer than I would believe." She kept her voice level. Her hands were steady because she was holding the edge of the table. "He came back 3 more times. Each time I suspected he did not need what he asked for. He left, and he did not return. And I have wondered for 7 years whether the remedy worked." The silence that followed was not empty. It was the silence of a house settling, of old wood remembering the shape of weight. Edmund Vane looked at her, and in his eyes, dark, careful, ancient, she saw the recognition she had been waiting for. Not surprise, not shock, just the slow, heavy turning of a lock that had been shut a very long time. "You remember," she said. "I remember everything," he said. "I remember your hands when you measured the drops. I remember the way you said, 'I know. That is why I do it.' I remember leaving because staying would have meant explaining things I had no right to explain to a woman with her whole life ahead of her." "And the ball," she said. "The mask, the column, the wine you did not drink." He was quiet. "I kissed you," she said. "At Blackthorn's ball. I chose the most invisible man in the room, and I kissed him to avoid being selected by the Vampire King. And it was you." She said the word the way you say a word you have held in your mouth for a long time, turning it over, tasting its edges. "Vampire." It sat between them on the table, solid and unmistakable, like a bottle that could not be unsealed again. "You are Lord Blackthorn," she said. "You are the Vampire King, and I kissed you to escape you. You have been sitting in this chair for 2 weeks, letting me identify your century-old tinctures and pretending to be Edmund Vane. And you knew. From the moment my lips touched yours, you knew exactly who I was." He did not deny it. He did not look away. "I knew before the kiss," he said. "I knew when you walked into the ballroom. I have known where you were for 7 years. I did not come back to the shop because I could not offer you what a mortal life could. I could not offer you aging, illness, the ordinary cruelties that make ordinary joys bearable. So you collected me instead. You had my sister bring me to your ball, and when I kissed you to escape, you followed me home. Your sister came to me," he said. And this was the second blow, quieter than the first, but deeper. "She approached my steward 6 months ago, offering your expertise in exchange for social favor. I gave her the invitation because it was the only way to see you again that did not involve walking into your shop and admitting that I am the creature who cannot sleep and cannot stop remembering the way you count drops." Vivian stood. The chair scraped against the floor. The sound was sharp and final. "You should have told me," she said. "You should have walked into the shop. You should have been the man who could not sleep instead of the king who collects people." "I would have—" She stopped. The sentence had too many endings. She chose the honest one. "I would have given you the remedy for free." She left. The door closed quietly behind her, which was worse than if she had slammed it. The following week, Marguerite arrived at Vivienne's rented room in a state of furious composure. Not because of any letter. No letter had come. But because the solicitor who had filed the deed transfer had written to Marguerite that morning declining to represent her further. And the merchant who had co-signed her loan had cancelled their arrangement the day before. "What have you done?" Marguerite said. "I have been working. The solicitor says the paperwork is irregular. The merchant won't return my letters. If the records are examined, they will show that the debts Mother accrued were contracted under your direction, for your benefit, and that I signed the deed over under duress to protect the license." Vivienne was measuring dried chamomile into a muslin bag, her hands perfectly steady. "Yes, I know what the records will show. I have always known." "You cannot prove that." "I do not need to prove it. Lord Blackthorn's steward already has the receipts. Mr. Hadley keeps very thorough records of every transaction in this county. It is his nature. He has been supplying Blackthorn House for 11 years. And in that time, he has noticed a great many things about the way money moves through this town." She tied the muslin bag. "Your allies, Marguerite. The people you relied on. The solicitor who filed the deed transfer. The merchant who co-signed your loan. The steward at Blackthorn House who processed your original approach. I did not confront them. I simply continued working. And one by one, they found reasons to step away from you." Marguerite's face went still. It was the stillness of someone realizing the ground beneath them had shifted without a sound. "The solicitor," she said, "reviewed the paperwork last week. Found it irregular. He is unwilling to defend it in any formal capacity. The merchant received an order from Lord Blackthorn's household that is more valuable than your account. He chose the larger customer. Commerce, Marguerite. Mr. Hadley would say it is simply mathematics. You have been planning this. I have been working. There is a difference." Vivienne set the chamomile bag beside 5 others on the table. "I am not taking the shop from you. I am asking you to give me back the license that was mine. In exchange, you keep the property, the name, and the social standing you built from my sacrifice. It is a generous offer. I suggest you take it before the records are examined and the offer becomes less generous." Marguerite stood in the doorway for a long time. The silence between them was not the silence of 2 sisters reconciling. It was the silence of a negotiation, reaching its only possible conclusion. "I will have the papers drawn up by Friday," Marguerite said. She left. The door closed. Vivienne sat on the edge of her bed and breathed until the shaking in her hands stopped. She found Edmund, Lord Blackthorn, the Vampire King, standing in the garden behind Mr. Hadley's shop that evening. The air smelled of frost and lavender, and the metallic undertone she now understood was him. "You intervened," she said. "The steward's letter to Marguerite. The review of the financial records. That was you." "Yes." "I did not ask you to do that. No. The sacrifice was mine. The shop, the years, the work I lost. I chose to give that up. It was my decision. And you reached into it without asking and rearranged the pieces. as though it were a puzzle that needed solving. "I know," he said. His voice was the voice of someone who had lived long enough to recognize his own mistakes by their weight. "I have spent centuries solving problems with authority instead of listening. I saw what your sister was doing, and I acted the way I always act, from above. I should have asked. I should have stood beside you and asked what you needed. Yes, you should have. And if I had asked..." She considered this. The garden was quiet. Somewhere beyond the wall, a carriage passed. "I would have told you to give Mr. Hadley a reason to compile those receipts, and I would have asked you to stay out of it while I did the rest. You did the rest anyway. I did. But I did it angry. At you, not just at her. That is the part that matters." He nodded. The movement was small and careful, the nod of someone learning a new language. "I cannot undo what I did. But I can tell you that the steward will take no further action without your explicit instruction. The records are yours. The decision is yours." "The decision was always mine," she said. "That is what you need to understand." He understood. She saw it in the way he stepped back, not away, but into the space where support lived instead of control. It was a small movement. It meant everything. But there was the other matter, the mortal matter. The fact that she was 32 and aging, and he was ancient and not. The kiss at the ball had been cold, because his lips carried the temperature of centuries, and she had chosen it anyway. "The ball," she said. "When I kissed you, you reacted." "Yes. Not the way someone reacts to being kissed by a stranger. Something else. I felt it. A tension, a catching, as though something behind your ribs had shifted." He was quiet for a long time. The frost thickened on the garden wall. "I have not been kissed," he said, "by anyone, for a very long time. Longer than your lifetime. Longer than the lifetime of anyone you have ever met. And when you kissed me, not out of desire, but out of desperation, out of the need to survive, I felt something I had believed was extinct in me, not desire. Recognition. The same feeling I had 7 years ago when you handed me a sleep draft and said, 'I know. That is why I do it.' The feeling that someone was seeing the man and not the title." "And the cold?" she said. "The way you carry winter in your skin. If I choose this, if I choose you, I am choosing that. The distance, the centuries, the fact that you will outlive me by more time than I can comprehend. Unless," he said, and stopped. "Unless I choose not to be outlived." The offer settled like sediment, unspoken but present. Transformation. The cost of it. What she would surrender. Morning light. The taste of warm bread. The ability to mix a tincture and test it on her own tongue. The slow, ordinary cruelty of aging that made ordinary joys bearable, as he had said himself. "I will not choose it tonight," she said, "but I will not refuse it either. I need to understand what the kiss woke in you, what it means, what it changes." "That is fair," he said. "That is not fair," she said. Fair would be two mortals meeting in a shop and having a normal conversation about sleep remedies. This is something else entirely. But I have spent 3 years surviving on borrowed tables and borrowed names, and I have learned that fair is not the same as possible. He almost smiled. It was the same smile from 7 years ago. Not practiced, not social. The smile of someone remembering how. 6 months later, Vivian Alcott reopened her apothecary on Hartwell Street under her own name. With her own license, using her own key in the door for the first time in 3 years. The sign read, Alcott Apothecary, Herbalist and Compounder, and the paint was new, and the bell above the door rang the same way it always had. Mr. Hadley supplied her with ingredients at wholesale, not because she asked, but because, as he said, a woman who compounds foxglove tincture with that level of precision deserves proper materials, and I am tired of watching you work with second-rate camphor. He also supplied her, without comment, with a monthly order of lamp oil, camphor blocks, 3 dozen bottles of terrible wine, addressed to Lord Blackthorne and billed to the Blackthorne House account. The arrangement was unchanged. The customer was unchanged. Only the delivery route had altered. The bottles went to the apothecary now, where Vivian loaded them into a cart herself and drove them to the estate. And Edmund met her at the door, and they spent the evening cataloging his collection together while the candles burned low. She had not yet chosen. The question of mortality sat between them like a jar she had not opened, and he did not rush her, and she did not pretend it was not there. Some evenings she tested his preparations and wrote her notes in her private shorthand. He read over her shoulder and asked what the symbols meant, and she told him they meant she was working and he should find something useful to do. On one such evening she brought the sleep draught, the same formula she had given him 7 years ago, refined now, improved with a decade of additional knowledge. She set it on the table. "You still do not sleep," she said. "I have not slept in 400 years. Then this will not help, but I made it anyway." She pushed it toward him. "Because the act of making it, of being trusted with your discomfort, even the kind that cannot be cured, is the closest thing to intimacy I know how to offer with my hands." He picked up the bottle. He turned it in the candlelight. And then he did something she had not expected. He drank it, the entire bottle, in one long swallow, as though it were the wine he never touched at balls. "Did it work?" she asked. "No," he said. He set the bottle down. "But it tastes of rosemary and lavender, and the specific way you hold a dropper when you are concentrating, and that is better than sleep." She laughed. It was the laugh of someone who had forgotten she was allowed to. He reached across the table and took her hand. His fingers were cool. Hers were warm. Neither of them moved away. The candle between them held its flame perfectly steady, as though the air itself had decided not to interfere. Outside, the first light of morning pressed against the curtains he always drew. Inside, a woman who had survived on borrowed tables held the hand of a man who had survived on borrowed time. The bottles on the shelves around them contained centuries of remedies for ailments that could not be cured, mixed by hands that would not stop trying. The sleep draught sat empty between them, and what it had awakened in him, whatever ancient dormant thing had stirred when a mortal woman kissed him, out of desperation in a masked ballroom, was still stirring, still unnamed, still reaching toward the warmth of the living hand in his. She did not pull away. She measured his pulse against hers, one beat for every silence of his, a rhythm only they could hear, steady as drops falling into a bottle that had no bottom and no seal, and no need of either.